And we'll begin this then.
Another quorum, Mr. Chair.
Secretary Treasurer. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick and I will be chairing this hearing today. With me are my fellow panel members, Bonnie Oak-Charon, Stan Wilder, Heather McLean, and Michael Wildman. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances: noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration. Only item 4 received a statutory declaration for, so I will have to administer the oath on all the other applications that are before us today. Regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will be paused to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing of the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where added clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address for the record. We may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision and to all parties and those who have requested it, a written decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period during which the decision can be appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal for a fee. We have some items in business to deal with before we get onto the agenda. Declarations of interest. Any of the members have any declarations of interest on this panel, either this panel or the other 2 panels sitting today?
I do, Mr. Chair. I need to declare a conflict of interest for item number 5 today due to my work on the board of directors at Odyssey Theatre.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Confirmation of minutes. We don't have any minutes to confirm. We do have, however, before we get to the agenda, we do have one item on which an adjournment has been requested. And that item is item number 10, 266 Iona. If staff would please explain why this is necessary.
Mr. Chair, while reviewing the application, staff found out that one of the reliefs requested with regards to the setback fronting Iona was incorrect. And they also noticed that another variance was missing, which is relates to the garage being set back the same distance from the front lot line as the front wall.
Okay. Is the agent for the owner here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, it is. As Ms. Carvajal said, in the last few days, she and I have been going over the application, and we've noticed that the variance that it needs to be judged against for the corner side yard setback was incorrect. And then the wording on the variance related to the driveway width, related to lot width, was not correct. The sign that is up there now does not need to be changed because it does not refer to any numerical values. The only thing that would need to be changed would be the rescheduled committee hearing date, and we're asking for July 8th. The owner, who is also online, Mr. Subir Upal, he's the spouse of the owner. He has sent in the recirculation fee check, and the drawings do not change, and we have provided the committee with the updated variances. As I think you may have got a comment from one of the nearby neighbors who is now in support. They and others would like this construction to begin as soon as possible, as the building on the property right now is vacant. It was subject to a fire, and it's causing issues in the neighborhood. So we'd like to have, if possible, this rescheduled to July 8th.
Unfortunately, Mr. Robinson, because of the tight timelines, the earliest we can reschedule this to is the 22nd of July, which is the second meeting in July.
I understand the wording is the same. Everything is the same. Is it a matter of how many items are on the agenda?
It's the process, and the process is that this can be got on the 22nd of July, but not the 8th.
Okay.
So that's the earliest we can accommodate you and your applicant.
Okay. Could you let Mr. Upal speak if you could?
Regarding?
Just that he could maybe explain what's been going on the property.
Well, we can discuss that on the 22nd.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
All right, this therefore will adjourn this application
Excuse
to
me,
July
Mr. Chair.
22nd. All members are okay with this?
I believe Member Wilder has his hand up with a question.
Mr. Wilder? I don't have any audio. I think we've lost Mr. Wilder.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Just
Still can't hear you, Stan.
Can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yep. Please proceed.
The question I have very briefly is, in your letter of explanation, you mentioned the impact that the postponement might have on the insurance settlement with regards to this 2-year requirement. What adverse impact might going to July to the later meeting have with your applicant?
I think that's a question that maybe Mr. Upal, who's the spouse of the owner who's been involved in the insurance, if he could explain to the committee members, if the committee coordinator could allow him to speak, that would be Subir Upal, who's listed on the screen.
Yeah, sure. So this is Subir Rupal speaking. I'm the husband of the owner of the property on 266 Iona. So the issue becomes, sorry, I'll start my video here. The issue becomes is the insurance claim had to be settled within 2 years from the date of the incident, and that means that the repairs, remediation, everything has to be complete. Originally, we were going to remediate the property, but based on community input, they wanted us to redevelop, so we decided to get rid of the current structure, hopefully, and rebuild. The extension they gave us, though, was to start construction on this project in the late July, and that took into consideration the extension they gave to us due to COVID-19. So pushing it to the 22nd might postpone the approval till late August, which might impact the insurance payout. And unfortunately, in that case, we might have to renovate the existing structure versus building new. And that's a decision they made, and that was a decision in terms of our settlement. So at that point, it's out of my hand. So it's something I have to run by them, but they've been very vocal saying that, you know, they want the construction started late July, possibly early August, but that would be it for them. Otherwise, they would plan to remediate.
Thank you.
And from staff, the 8th, if you want to reiterate the reason why we can't put this on the agenda for the 8th of July.
Mr. Chair, on behalf of committee staff, unfortunately, because a recirculation is required in order to meet our legislative timelines for circulation, we just would not have enough days to prepare that notice and to send it out. Granted, the changes to the document may be minimal, but we still have to follow that same public notification process, sending the notices in the mail, and we would not be able to meet that timeline, unfortunately.
We need to meet our requirements, do we not?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So you've heard it from our staff, and unfortunately, I think we're going to have to stick with the July 22nd date for the for this item to be put back on our agenda.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you in a couple of weeks. All right. We'll now move to the regular agenda, and we'll start with item number 111 Lees Avenue. Is the agent online? Mr. Pearson there?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Before we begin, I'm going to have to, you're going to have to swear the oath.
Oh,
I'll just read it out, and you'll have to swear or affirm.
I can do that.
I can do that as well. I am
Well, either one of you.
Okay, Laura Downey, go ahead.
This is Miss Nitu?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
You swear? Okay. Thank you.
I swear.
All right. Mr. Pearson, if you'd like to make a brief presentation regarding this application.
Certainly. Essentially, we're only asking for some minor variances to the zoning. A reduction in lot area of approximately 16% and a reduction in the width of the lot, representing only a difference of little over 16%. The variances we're asking for are very minor in nature. They're desirable for the appropriate development of the neighborhood. They sit well within the general purpose and intent of the zoning bylaw. And within the official plan, the neighborhood is designated as a general urban area, which permits the development of a full range and choice of housing types to meet the needs of all ages, incomes, and life circumstances. I don't want to take up too much of your time. This is all covered in my covering letter.
Yeah.
And all the documentation was provided. So based on the fact that it's minor, we only had one letter of objection from a neighbor and he reversed that. So he is now in support, Mr. Allen. And we received 2 other letters from neighbors in support of the application. And from all the organizations that were circulated, none have any concern, including the planning staff at the City of Ottawa.
These variances are essentially existing conditions, correct?
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. You're aware of the Ministry of Transportation for Ontario?
Yes.
Approvals and permits are required prior to the construction and or demolition of any buildings or structures prior to the issuance of any municipal building permits or approvals. So they want to be circulated with all proposed changes and development to the subject lands. You're aware of your requirement?
There is actually no change to the footprint of the building.
But the still needs to be informed. That's their requirement.
Okay. I have their letter here somewhere. I know they said they
So you need to
have no concern.
You need to comply with their request.
Certainly.
You're in their permitting zone.
Okay.
Right. Any questions from any of the members regarding this application? Is there anyone else here to speak to the application? All in
We do
favor?
have, Mr. Chair, we did have someone that had their hand raised. I'm not sure if they wanted to speak to this application. I've just promoted him to panelist.
Is there someone who wishes to speak?
I don't believe so. I think it's okay now.
Members of the panel, is everyone in agreement that we should grant this application?
Yes.
Hands up, everyone. All right, that's unanimous. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Next application we'll deal with is item number 2 on the agenda, 1195 Wellington. The agent there.
I'm present myself. Can you hear me, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
who am I speaking to?
Mike
And I'm
Folger.
here as well.
Mr. Folger, your address, sir?
1195 Wellington Street West.
Okay. And Ms. Smith is also speaking?
Yes.
And
Yes.
your address, Ms. Smith?
941 Maryvale Road.
Okay. Are you going to be making the presentation on this?
Yes, I will.
Okay. This is an application for minor variances hang on a second. A minor variance is to permit a reduced distance from a residential zone for a commercial patio or deck and an increased height for an outdoor commercial patio deck. It is proposed to construct a stairway to provide access to the second floor deck. Please proceed.
Well, unfortunately, I didn't get my presentation into the committee on time. I think the coordinator has performed a miracle here. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So this is a great location. It's the lounge. It's the red dot there. It's within 600 meters of Tunney's Pasture Transitway, walking distance to the Parkdale Market and Park, the GCTC, and a host of other amenities, condos, apartments being built. It's really a positive addition to the neighborhood. Next, please. Is there another one? Great, sorry. It's on the Hintonburg strip of Wellington, 1 block west of Parkdale, and on the corner of Wellington and Hamilton Avenue. Currently, it has a beautiful maple tree on it. You can see it here. At the back, there are canteens serving ice cream and Cajun food. You can see it's sheltered from the curbside of Wellington Street, which is why we're seeking the variance from section 85 3.2, since a 2-meter high fence would detract from the ambience created by the plantings.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Next, please.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
We need the statutory declaration as well.
Oh,
on this
I'm
file.
sorry. Pardon me. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, Ms. Smith. Yes, we have to do this. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, keep going.
The proposed patio is contained in the applicant's boundaries, and it's 66.5 meters to the nearest residential zone. Next. This is the view towards that residential property across 4 lanes of Wellington. It's behind that brick building and those trees there. The next slide is the original second floor deck. It was removed in 2012. And so the second variance is for the rebuilt deck to be permitted to be part of the patio. It is more than 2 meters above grade, and the clause is 85-6. So the tree is a beautiful attraction at night. Can I have the next one, please? As you can see, and if you've ever walked by there, just a rundown on the timelines. The owners bought the building in 2007, and as I mentioned, in 2012, the second floor deck came down. In 2013, we applied for a variance, and everyone really supported it, but the committee had a problem with the fact that there wasn't an attached restaurant because of the way the bylaw was written, so the application was denied. We've then applied for a restaurant in the basement of the building with new stairs going down, which have now been built. The permit was approved, and the work for the restaurant is almost complete.
So this will be a patio associated with a functioning restaurant.
And so last year, could I have the next slide, please? So there's the site plan. Last year, we received the permit to rebuild the second-story deck, but without stairs. And it has been approved, and construction has started on that second-floor deck. So if you want me to run through quickly the plans, I can do that.
Please. If you wouldn't mind, please.
Okay, next, please. This is the basement, the new stairs going down to the basement, the washrooms, and the restaurant that was existing when we submitted for these drawings for the second floor deck. Next, please. This is the ground floor plan. The stairs on an angle there going up to the new deck. the canteen, and the building itself is now a hair salon. It's always been a hair salon. Next, please. This is the second floor deck with the stairs going up, and there's a couple of levels on the deck. So the patios will be at grade at an elevation of 3.56 meters, and then the upper one at, sorry, there's 3 levels, the grade, 3.6 meters and 4.01 meters at the highest point. The dimensions of the elevated terraces are 41 square meters, and the ground floor level is 22 square meters. It will be closed. Next, you can see the elevations. Next drawing, please. There's the elevation of the deck. The patio will be closed and clear by 11 on Sundays to Thursday and 12 on Friday and Sunday. So we believe that this proposed patio will be a positive addition to the neighborhood. It will add an attractive, appealing, and unique feature to the area, particularly to the corner of Wellington and Hamilton. And it's in keeping with and gives effect to the vision of the official plan 2003, adding texture, vibrancy, animation, and pedestrian use to the traditional Main Street designation of Wellington Street. So as for the 4 tests, the variances are minor. The proposed deck is only 8.5 meters less than the required 75 meters setback from the residential zone, and it's on the other side of busy Wellington. The planting and the landscaping provide the buffer, and the second floor deck was existing and has been rebuilt. It would be a wonderful use if it could be accessible from grade. The variances are desirable for the appropriate development of the property, animating an up-and-coming developing area of Hintonburg. And I believe that the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw and official plan is maintained. It's perfect in this TM zone. So I also sent images of a visioning exercise that went on with the community, which had the original concept for this tree house kind of patio, and so it's been involved with the community all along, and I know we received 2 positive emails regarding this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. You mentioned the residential properties on the south side of Wellington. What about the residential properties on Hamilton Avenue, north of the subject site, on the west side of Hamilton?
I believe they're the required distance away. It's my understanding.
Okay, so it's only on the south side of Wellington where we don't meet the bylaw requirement.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Any of the members have any questions?
May just on the ambient music, can you go into some detail on how that will be done, how long it will run, that sort of thing?
Well, the ideal goal was to have background music till, you mean the hours as
yes.
well?
Yeah.
Well, to be able to keep it open by 11 p.m. Sunday to Thursday and 12 on Friday. If you ever walk down there, you can see it's a very lively area now and also with the patio out in front of the restored Grace Hospital. It's really becoming a very interesting pedestrian neighborhood in that area, and it'd be nice to keep it open on the weekends and during the week in the summer.
And the would be some sort of wall-mounted speaker. Is that what you're thinking?
Mike, do you want to address that?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yes. We're not interested in playing loud music. That's for sure. We're trying to stay in a more upscale mode when it comes to. So we want just low ambient music. Yes, it's wall-mounted speakers. We would use 4 of them so that we can reach small areas easily, as opposed to using a single speaker to try to cover a whole area. So our approach is very mindful when it comes to the community, and we're not looking for to build another loud space. It's more of an upscale thing.
What about the lighting on the deck?
The lighting, we have existing lighting built into the east troughing of the roof, which of the roof, which lights up the second floor balcony, and we're using kind of like Christmas lighting and accent lighting underneath the deck and on the tree to illuminate the patio on the ground level.
You won't be creating any intrusive lighting that's going to
No.
affect the residential properties?
No.
Okay.
No.
And your hours of operation on the deck, on the patio?
Will be presently from 9 to 9.
9 a.m. till 9 p.m.?
Yes.
And then
Previously, Mike, you asked for 11 p.m.
Yes. We asked, we spoke with the community association if we can go till 11 p.m. And 12 to allow us to tear down, but we're not planning on playing music beyond 11 p.m. But presently, as our tenancy, we're only requiring till 9 p.m. But we would like allowance till 11 p.m.
And the seating on the patios up above and below, how many seats?
The total is 40 seats. So I think there's 24 on the upper seats and the rest in the lower area.
So if we set a condition for the maximum seating to be 40 seats, that's all right?
Yes, it's limited by the washrooms, so it's a building code issue.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just double checking your distance to the zoning that you're making me nervous with that comment.
Yeah, because there's a new condominium that just got built on Hamilton,
I see.
and another one going up beside it.
Hamilton. There's a MC zone. Did they go for rezoning?
It's a residential building that's going in right now. There's a couple of them, actually.
I think that the zoning says to residential zone, not to the building.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the fact is it's within 60 meters and it's a reality. It's there. Anyhow, okay. So the maximum number of seats, patrons are going to be 40 seats top on both decks.
Yes.
Your hours of operation, you'll be closing by 11 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah, the music will be ambient only and will be off by 11 p.m. at the latest.
Yes.
The lighting, you're going to ensure that lighting is non-intrusive for nearby neighbors.
Absolutely.
Okay, so if we approve this application with those conditions, you guys are happy with that?
Yes.
All right, because we normally do impose patio conditions in this circumstance. I think Ms. McLean wanted to speak. Ms. McLean?
I have a couple of questions. One for planning on why the bylaw restricts the elevation of an outdoor patio to 2 meters. And then questions for the applicant regarding the food business that's currently happening at Great on site. Is that to remain in addition to the new restaurant? And then thirdly, can you explain to me the restaurants in the the new restaurants in the basement, you're going to come up the stairs to the grade patio and then up further stairs to the outside, up to the second floor patio. I just want to clarify that.
Yes, Susan,
Yeah.
do you want me to speak to that?
Sure, if you'd like to, yeah.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
the access to the restaurant in the basement, the kitchen is for food prep. Serving and plating takes place on the main level. Seating for the restaurant in the basement is an out of season thing. Majority of the focus is on the patio during 6 months of the year. So if that answers your question.
Can I just point out, there's also access to the kitchen at the back of the building.
Yeah.
If we go back to the basement, there's not as many stairs, it's more open. So there's another access directly to the kitchen at the back.
But then you'd come around to the side to go up the stairs to the second floor
Right.
patio. And then there seemed to be a food business going on at grade on Hamilton.
That's right.
Is that disappearing when the new basement goes into the building, or how is that operating?
That is part and parcel. So what's going on is preparations are made in the kitchen down below, but service is taking place from that kiosk or cabana on the main floor, on the main level outside.
But it's all the same restaurant.
Yes.
Okay. And then secondly, if I could hear from planning staff just on the intent of the bylaw to limit the elevation to 2 meters?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I believe the intent is to sort of prevent that sort of disconnect or like a reduction of animation. Typically what we want to see on traditional main streets is an interaction between pedestrians and businesses. So if we were to have a deck higher than 2 meters, that sort of animation would be lost. However, here, because the deck is sort of a complementary to what's already happening in the patio on the main floor, we wouldn't see any issues.
Thank you for that. And I just wondered if we imposed a condition about the operation of the restaurant at grade being the same restaurant business that's in the basement. Would that be a problem?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, any other members have any comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, I'm in favor in general of the application, but not necessarily in favor of the music going on till 11 o'clock. And that's based on context of what other similar businesses are doing in the area. So I'll just throw that comment out there.
Mr. Wildman,
I would like,
you have some familiarity with outdoor facilities and noise. Any comments?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I was just going to reiterate the same thing that my colleague just said. I am supportive of the application. I think it's a good application. I think it will be a benefit to the neighborhood. I do have concerns with the ambient noise later in the evening, potentially bouncing off some of those hard surfaces down that narrow corridor of the street line, and potentially being a concern to the residential uses. So I'll put that out there that I agree with my committee colleague on that, and I would prefer to see a 9 p.m. stop on the ambient music.
Yeah, I happen to agree with Ms. Shar Oaks and Mr. Wildman regarding regarding the sound on the patio after 9 p.m.
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment to that, please?
Please.
Yes. When speaking with the community association, this subject did come up. And we do have the Royal Oak and Daniel O'Connell's just a block away, and what they're basically creating a certain amount of noise. We're not looking to make that type of noise. We're appealing to a different demographic. We're looking to introduce something of a drinking hole that's loud, and I don't want to put any of the other business down, but we're not looking to have a loud place. We're looking to have something of a different flavor for the neighborhood, which the neighborhood doesn't have presently. Most of the, the two other places that are close by are for, it's a louder type of thing, and we're looking to provide the neighborhood with something more warm, more casual, more relaxed, and quieter. So we're really not looking to make noise. We're looking to create mood. And we're looking to appeal to another demographic, which is not there in our neighborhood yet. And there's a lot of people in the neighborhood that would like that. It is, that's the type of neighborhood we live in, and there's nothing really beautiful and quiet and ambient for them yet.
Ms. McLean, you had another comment?
Just wanted to clarify again, will there be a restaurant in the basement of the building in the wintertime?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wilder, regarding the limits on noise, speakers on the deck, 11 p.m. or 9 p.m.? You can't hear.
No, I believe, notwithstanding what's happening up the street, I just feel that, we've dealt with this before with other applications. I understand that this will provide a different environment, perhaps, than the loud, rowdy, perhaps, up the street. But I really still feel that we'd be looking at 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
Ms. McLean, your opinion on 9 p.m. versus 11?
9 p.m. I'm fine with. I'm not sure what is meant by ambient music.
In reference to ambient, what I'm talking about is something that's relaxed and chilled out, if I can use the term. It's not, it's more relaxed music. It's for an older clientele that that doesn't really appeal to loud playing music,
I think typically our condition is that there's no live or reproduced music, and that's generally our patio condition, but I just leave it at that. I'm fine with the 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay. I think you've heard from all of us that a 9 p.m. cessation for reproduced music is what we're going to go with. So. Regarding the conditions associated with this application and for the patio, the lighting shall be non-intrusive. The music will be there'll be no live music. It'll be reproduced music only, and it will cease by 9 p.m. regardless of the day of the week. The hours of operation 9 a.m. to, I'm assuming, 11 p.m. Seating on the two patios will be at a maximum of 40, and as Ms. Smith said, that's because of building code requirement and washroom requirements as well. And we will craft something regarding a condition that says that the food service provision outside and the food services provision in the basement are the same company, I guess it is, or the same restaurant. We'll just clean that up a little bit. All in favor of the application with those conditions in place?
Aye.
The application is approved unanimously. Good luck with your project.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Chair and
you.
Madam Chairs.
Thank you very much.
Now move to item 3 on the agenda, 27 Monk Street. And again, it's Ms. Smith is the agent for the applicant, I believe.
Hi, Scott Allen, Foten, present. I'm
All right.
part of. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'm going to administer the oath
Yep.
regarding the sign posting. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay. Are you making the presentation, sir?
Yes, I'd be pleased to make the presentation. And
All right.
as you can see, Brian Casgrande of our office is also
Yes.
available.
All right, please proceed.
So the application, as noted, I'll actually ask if the coordinator could please put up the slide I provided, slide 2. This will just kind of provide a picture of what we're proposing. So this is 27 Monk Street in the Glebe. It's the same block that's shared with Bank Street. And what we're proposing is a 7-unit, 4-story apartment building. No vehicle parking is proposed as part of this building. And 6 bicycle spaces are provided as part of this building. It's going through site plan control at present, and the reason we're here before you for a minor variance is to allow 6 variances related to the zoning. The variances.
Just let me interrupt for a second. In the site plan review process, how far along are you?
So the site plan review is advanced, and the planning issues, to my understanding, have been resolved for the most part, and it's at this point just kind of reached a point where the planning staff are comfortable with this hearing taking place.
You don't anticipate any further variances?
No, it is in the client's interest that we come to you with what we believe is going to be essentially the final take on the plans.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I just wanted that clarified. Please proceed.
Appreciate it, Mr. Chair. So to just itemize the variances briefly, and I'd be pleased to go into the numbers if you'd like. The first 2 deal with lot width and area. So the lot is more narrow than is permitted for a low-rise apartment building, and it is by that same level has a smaller area. Side yard variances are requested for the north and south side yards. Amenity space variance is requested. And then 2 permitted projection variances are requested. 1 for the balconies at the front of the building and 1 for the stairwell at the rear of the building. And just to kind of go into how our variances meet the general intent of the bylaw. So they facilitate the provision of additional housing choices in a manner that's compatible with the existing prevailing land use patterns. The R4 zone, which it is subject to, is intended to permit a diversity of land uses in terms of residential housing ranging from detached all the way up to low rise, which is what we're proposing. It's important to note that with regard to this application, the same essential building envelope, that is built form, of what we are proposing would be permitted in the context of a semi-detached building. And essentially what we are hoping is that we can find a way through the transitions and through the urban design to essentially demise the units inside to make something that provides more housing, and that contributes to the urban realm appropriately. In terms of the intent of the OP, it is designated general urban area. And again, general urban area really relates to compatibility and permits a wide array of uses, including residential, that are permitted based on the situational context. Importantly, urban design is measured in the official plan through section 4.11 and section 2.5.1 and relies on the transition and contribution to the urban realm as essential factors, which we believe we've applied in this design. In terms of desirability, this is an important note. The R4 zoning, as I'm sure the committee is aware, is in the process of being updated. With the latest information we have from city staff on the updates to the R4 zoning, 3 of the 6 variances being proposed would be eliminated due to changes in the zoning. And these are lot width, where the 10.8 meter lot width would, in the future R4 zoning, permit an 11 meter, as proposed here, low-rise apartment building with up to 8 units. And I'll note again, we are proposing 7. The communal amenity area requirement would be removed in place of a requirement that asks that all land not being used for things like aisles, parking, etc., be devoted to soft landscaping, which has been achieved. And the projecting rear staircase. So any building code mandated staircase up to 2.2 meters will be permitted in the zoning, which is what's been proposed.
However, that's future zoning, not the zoning we're dealing with right now.
I agree, Mr. Chair, and I
Yes.
note this
So
just
let's
as,
not talk about the what ifs. Could you show us where the outdoor or the communal amenity space is going to be on this site?
certainly, if I could ask the coordinator to switch to the site plan. In the meantime, I'll just give you a background on the amenity area generally. So we are proposing 48.6 meters squared in the rear yard and an additional 3.6 meters squared per unit balcony. And that's 6 units have a balcony. We have not proposed a balcony at the ground floor. The reason being just to kind of allow for a more suitable transition to the urban realm. Great, it looks like we have the site plan. So as you can see, this is the staircase that we discussed at the rear that requires the projection. There is a rear lane that is shared with the adjacent building that's where they have their parking. Just for context, it's not proposed to be used by this development. And yes, the soft landscaping is back here behind the building. And it's noted that there's soft landscaping inside the building and in front, and therefore the proposal also meets the 30% landscaping requirement for this development.
Okay. And you said the balconies are what size for 6 of the 7 units?
So they're 3.6 meters squared, and the total contributed by that is 21.6 meters.
Okay. All right. Anything else?
I'd be happy to go into how the other variances are minor in nature, but I can just leave it to questions from the committee.
Just briefly, if you wouldn't mind.
Gladly. So I'll just begin with the reduced lot width. So I note that the neighborhood, which we agree with city staff, it's a comment from the report that the neighborhood has shown to have low-rise apartment buildings on undersized lots that remain functional and compatible. And I will also note that the bylaw does permit in the R4 zone lot widths of 10 meters on various other typologies, such as semi-detached buildings, which would have similar setbacks to what we're proposing. And the reduced lot area kind of shares some of these undersized lot requirements, so I'll continue with that. As far as the side yard setbacks, we are asking for a setback of 1.2 meters on the north side and 0.6 meters on the south side. And that is reflective of a typical side yard setback for many of the other typologies, including duplexes, triplexes, semi-detached, etc., which I bring up because At 11 meters, we are proposing a height that is the same building envelope as those typologies. We also note that we are improving both the setbacks. The existing building is presently set back 0.3 meters from the north property, and we are proposing 1.2 meters, which allows for an access and maintenance path between the two buildings. And as you are aware, committee, if you refer to the south setback, it is to the 900 Bank building, which is a substantial 8-story building that fronts onto both Bank Street and onto Monk Street. And where we abut on this building is a access path, as well as their entrance to the garage, which is at the lower level, a blank wall. And so the 0.2 meter setback we are proposing, as well as the access path, create a suitable separation in terms of urban realm contributions. Moving on to amenity space, we had this discussion, so I will just briefly note that as well. This is a very great location for a dwelling of this scale. Parks within walking distance are Patterson's Creek Park, Lansdowne Park, Browns Inlet Park, Commissioners Park, and Capitol Park, as well as other institutional amenities such as the Glebe Community Center. So in that regard, it is well served by amenities external to the site. Continuing to the front balcony setback, I would like to make the note that what we are proposing is reflective of the existing condition. So we're not trying to go beyond that. And in fact, the existing condition reflects the balcony projection of the adjacent building. So as you know very well with mature neighborhoods, you make your front building wall setback the average or equivalent to the adjacent building. We've done that and we permit that. However, the projecting balcony doesn't have such a zoning standard in the zoning bylaw. And essentially we're trying to carry the balcony flush. If the coordinator can maybe go to slide 4, it indicates how we're carrying the balcony projections from the adjacent to this site. And finally, thank you for your patience, committee, is the variance for the exterior. Okay, and there's the image. As you can see, we're carrying the streetscape and we're trying to kind of, through use of materials and through use of massing, respect the existing development and do something compatible that's not necessarily jumping out from the remainder. And sorry, back to my last variance. So the stair projection, we are going an additional, I guess it would be 54 meters. The purpose of the stairs, as noted, is a building code requirement to provide a secondary access in case of fire and things like that. And the benefit of this is if we can locate the stairs here in the rear yard, it definitely omits the need to have staircases on the front, as is done in some developments. And I think this creates a more compatible and more functional development. And that concludes my my discussion of the variances, and I'm happy to take questions.
Any questions from members of the panel? Okay. Thanks very much. I note that we've made a slight mistake on the purpose of the application. We refer to the site as being a currently vacant lot. As you know, that's not the case. Anyhow, would staff like to comment on this application briefly, please?
Mr. Chair, staff has no concerns with the variances sought. As it has been previously explained, the reduction of the lot width, there are other apartments in the area that are located in undersized lots. The reduced side yards, they will still have functionality. The reduced balconies at the front will not really have an adverse impact onto the pedestrians since they are from the second floor up and above. And as it has been pointed out, the increase of the projection of the stairs is due to a building code. requirements. So the permit has no concerns.
Okay. Thank you. And I believe we have Mr. Johnson who'd like to speak to this.
Yes, thank you. I'm Frank Johnson.
Could you give us your address, please, sir?
My address is 169 Fifth Avenue.
All right, thank you.
And I own number 25 Monk Street, which is the property immediately to the north.
Okay.
I would like to strongly support this application because I think it complements the residential area very well. It provides a nice use of the efficient use of the land and intensification, which is appropriate. It maintains the same height. So I'm very keen on that. And it's obviously geared for people who walk to work and want to use their bicycles as storage for enough bicycles in the basement, I think is planned. So overall, I would offer my strong support for it. Thank you.
And I take it that the applicant or their agent has been in contact with you regarding this project?
Yes, we have. I've discussed the design in detail with them, yes.
And all potential issues have been resolved?
Absolutely, yeah. No, there's no issues whatsoever from me.
Okay. Thank you very much for your
Thank
input. I'm prepared to grant the application. All other members who are in agreement with granting this application as filed. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll now deal with item number 4 on the agenda, 107 York Street. I believe Mr. Simmons is the agent for the applicant.
Mr. Chair, yes, I'm here.
All right. I'm going to have to go through the
We submitted a
oh yeah,
statutory
that's right.
declaration.
Nope. You get a pass. You get a free pass.
I thought we got extra stars or something because we're the only ones.
All right. If you could give us a brief presentation on what the owner wishes to do with the site.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. I'm hoping that a site plan, or okay, we're going straight to a roof plan. Well, let me explain that my client has occupied 107 York Street for quite a few years. They are also the owner of 105 York Street. And they are currently undertaking the amalgamation of the 2 units into one wider, larger unit. It's a couple, they have one of the parents living with them. And what we're doing is we're taking down the divisions between the 2 sides. There was currently screens running between the 2 sides. And this is a bit of a strange plan because it's stretched widthwise about an extra 50% compared to what the proportions should be. But anyway, you can see that there were originally 2 stairwells heading up to the rooftop, and one of them is being replaced with an elevator. The elevator is aligned with the stair shaft down below. But in order to exit the elevator, we need to create a vestibule. And so a roughly 4 foot by 8 foot little chunk is being expanded to create a vestibule to come out of the elevator. And then to the north side of that elevator shaft, there was an inaccessible area of roof. It's now become accessible. And so we'd like to continue the roof deck into that area. But my clients would also like to put in a hot tub, and that is the spot to put it. And so we do want to put a screen around it. Now, any of this work that they're doing requires a variance. It's not that it's exceeding the heights and all these sorts of things. It's just that any work that goes on this building, because it's an heritage building and so on, and it's a non-conforming use, under the zoning bylaw, an existing non-conforming use. We therefore have to come to you to get approval.
It's a legal non-conforming use.
Legal
Mr.
non-conforming, yes, legal non-conforming use. Thank you. We also are proposing to construct an open sort of pergola structure to the south side of the elevator.
Do we have? I think we have graphics for that.
Do we? Okay. And flip on to the next picture. I didn't specifically ask that that be there. Okay, that's just the roof. We could go back one. That's just a roof plan from above. It's just showing the location of that pergola area. The yellow hatched in area is the extension of the existing penthouse to create the vestibule. And then to the south of that area was where the pergola is being constructed. And if we could, if the coordinator could go back to the slide, I think it's important to just see the context of this. All right, so that was where we started, and then we had the roof plan, and then I think we had a picture. Oh, the elevation. All right, so we're not amending the elevation in any way, except just at the very top, we're widening up the penthouse slightly, but it's set well back from the front. And you can see a line near the very top of the drawing, which represents the location of the pergola. They currently have an extendable awning, but they want to replace that with something more permanent in that zone there. The rest of the facade is staying intact. You could flip on to another.
In your professional opinion, the variances meet the 4 tests of the Act?
Mr. Chair, I believe that these are all very minor, and if you're willing to flip onto the pictures, I think you'll see that we're surrounded by taller buildings, certainly on a couple of sides, and that so this is the north, and not just to we're creating privacy from the 7-story apartment building to the northeast, and this 5-story building to the northwest. Not only that, I mean, it blocks the view down onto the mess down there, frankly, for the people using the patio. I think they should be given an award for being courageous enough to live in this area with what goes on in the street here. And then if there was one more picture, I think it was actually back. It was just across the street. There's a tall apartment building across the street, as this one here. So you've got this tall apartment building across the street, and having this little pergola and so on, it allows them to grow vines up and get a little bit of shelter from the view of the people living across the street. So that's the context, and I think once you understand the context, realize that all these things are quite minor and appropriate for the continued use that they have established there. Mr. Chair.
From a permission application perspective, it's your professional opinion that the desirability of this project is manifested and it's in the public interest?
I believe it is, Mr. Chair, because the more people we have living in the market in this area who are there to watch the streets and participate, make them safe, I think there's a benefit to have this mixed approach to the occupation of the market areas.
And in your opinion, the impact of this project would be positive?
I believe it's a very positive impact and has minimal impact on the adjacent properties.
Okay. All right. Any of the other panel members have any questions or comments for Mr. Simmons? Okay. I'm just looking.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. And you are, please?
I am Ajit Someshwar, who owns 109 York.
Okay. Welcome, sir.
My only issue is that because it impacts my property, I need a structural engineer to certify that whatever they're doing at the rooftop It's not going to impact the stresses of my property.
Well, that's actually an issue between yourself and the property owner right next door. Mr. Simmons?
I would be happy to respond to that. We actually already have the interior renovation work well underway. We do have a structural engineer actively involved. It's a very old building and it was built in a very strange way. We're essentially replacing much of the interior structure with a steel frame and taking all the loads into account. And we're also very carefully respecting the integrity of the party wall between the properties and improving it. We found many defects within it and we're undertaking improvements from a sound and fire safety point of view.
I just need a certification of that. That's it.
All of the drawings and the building permit applications related to this will be do have accompanying structural engineering documents.
That'll be good enough. I'm happy that
by a structural engineer.
I'm happy that you're doing something good to the properties. But the only thing is that I do need to know that there is no long-term impact on my property.
Right.
Well, you're going to find out from your next door neighbor when you get the documentation.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Any questions or comments from the members of the panel? I'm prepared to approve this application. A show of hands for the rest of the members as to their level of approval or otherwise. Everybody okay with this application?
Subject to me getting the...
Yeah. Well, Mr. Simmons has already said that you're going to be getting the documentation, so.
All right. Okay.
The rooftops are adjoining, right? The rooftops adjoin. That's the other thing we're a little bit worried about because they're adjoining. It's Charles McDougall. I did the property management here and they are adjoining. That's why.
And you are, sir? Who are you, sir?
Charles McDougall. I do the property management for Mr. Chamoissois at 109 York Street.
Mm-hmm.
And on the list there. And it's just that the rooftops are adjoining, right? And the membrane, you know, they go across the top and we're just, that's why you'd like the structural engineer to certify. Okay.
Mr. Simmons?
Mr. Chair, there is a privacy wall constructed between the two rooftops that currently exist that we're not proposing to modify. I think the only issue is actually the drainage between the two buildings seems to be intermingled. The two roof drains, the one from the 109 and one from our side, seem to go down to the same pipe. So I don't actually, I'm sort of launched into this because my staff member who deals with this project is on sick leave, but I believe they're resolving this in an appropriate way. But there'll be no effect on the integrity of the roof membrane on the 109 York Street.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So are we all in favor of this application, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes.
All right. Your application has been granted. Good luck with your project.
Yeah, make some money in Ottawa.
Next application we'll be hearing is 71 Bronson. Is the applicant there?
Yes, I'm here. It's Louise McCoupin speaking.
Okay. All right, I have to read the solemn. You have to read you the solemn declaration. You can swear to it. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
All right, thank you very much. If you could give us a brief presentation on what you intend to do to the property.
Perfect. Okay, my name's Louise McGugan. I'm a heritage architect in Ottawa, and I'm currently working with the Anglican Diocese of Ottawa on this project. This is Roper House. It's located at 71 Bronson. It's one of the original large historic lumber baron mansions in Ottawa, and it was constructed in 1873. It's located at the north end of Bronson Avenue, looking over LeBreton Flats. The building is listed on the City Heritage Registry, and it's also located in the Cathedral Hill Heritage Conservation District, which is designated under Part 5 of the Heritage Act.
Okay.
The building is currently owned by the Anglican Diocese since the 1950s, and it's used for their offices. It generally remains intact as it originally was built, with the exception of the fact it's lost its historic wraparound porch that was located at the southeast corner of the building. It was taken down sometime prior to the 1950s. These are two historical fire insurance maps where you can see it. And then the next slide shows two historical pictures of the house with its original wraparound porch.
Okay.
The next slide, please. The intention of the project it's basically, the current project includes significant renovations to the exterior and the interior of the building. It also includes the introduction of a new exterior barrier-free ramp to allow for barrier-free access to the main entrance of the building. The intention is to integrate the barrier-free ramp into a new traditional wraparound porch. It'll be located at the southeast corner of the building, and it's been designed to be very similar in massing and scale to the previously removed historical wraparound porch that was at that location. The current zoning, interestingly enough, it includes a heritage overlay. The heritage overlay allows for the ramp to provide barrier-free access to the building, but it does not allow for projections into a front yard or corner side yard. That isn't permitted. So our proposed minor variance is to be able to permit the projection, which consists of the new wood roof porch structure and supporting columns, to be part of the new exterior barrier-free ramp to provide protection from the ramp, for the ramp. You can go to the next slide. That's a picture of the house with the design of the porch. It's the same scale, the same massing, the same column spacing, as far as we can tell from the historic pictures. And the next picture is the picture of the porch from the side. In our opinion, the reinstatement of the porch structure with its integrated ramp accomplishes the barrier-free function that we're trying to achieve. And we feel it's very highly appropriate and compatible with Roper House. It's going to reinforce the heritage attributes of the building. It's very compatible with the building and its setting. And overall, it represents a positive contribution to the Heritage Conservation District in general. We have our heritage permit from the City Council, and we also have a building permit approved in place subject to approval of the minor variance. That's my quick presentation.
You're aware of the comments from forestry?
We've been through that already. There's a tree on the site, and when we submitted for building permit, the tree questions have been addressed, and we've shown the new planting.
Okay. All right. The other members have any questions for Mr. Neven regarding this application? Prepared to grant the application. Everyone else, all in favor of the application?
Mr. Chair, I believe there was someone else that wanted to speak on this.
Okay. Hang on here.
Mr. Lyons?
Representing the diocese. Okay, Mr. Lyons.
I don't really want to speak. I was only ready to answer questions. The only comment from the diocesan perspective is that the replacing this heritage porch or reintroducing this heritage porch was a brilliant way of providing the accessible access to a heritage building. And I applaud the architect for her innovation in that manner.
Thank you very much, Jim.
I think, are we all in favor of this application, I believe? Correct? All right. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
The next application we have on the agenda, two applications actually, items 6 and 7, both relating to 29 Langevin. And this is an application for consent to subdivide the property into 2 separate parcels of land. One parcel will contain the existing 2-story detached dwelling and propose to construct a 2-story detached dwelling on the other parcel. And then applications for minor variances are also before us to permit reduced lot areas and lot widths, a reduced side yard setback, and to permit a porch to project into the front yard. The existing 2-story attached dwelling will remain on one side of the property, and it is proposed to construct a 2-story detached dwelling on the other side. So, is the agent with us?
Mr. Chair, Todd Duckworth from Hoban Architecture. I'm the agent for the applicant.
I don't hear you very well. Could you either raise the volume or get closer to the mic?
How about now?
That's better. I need to swear to the declaration. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay, thank you. Please proceed with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Picking up on your summary, the proposal is to sever a property that is essentially a double-wide property in New Edinburgh. The property to the bottom of the page on the south is an existing heritage home, which will be retained. And we're proposing to sever the north part of the property, which is currently vacant, and to construct a new 2-story detached dwelling on that portion of the land. An easement will be established between the 2 homes for the purpose of a shared driveway to provide parking into the rear of the lot. Just by way of a bit of contextual analysis, if we could advance to quickly to the next slide and then to the last one. So that's a rendering of the proposed 2-story dwelling, and on the right-hand side is the edge of the heritage home, and can be seen the laneway accessing the shared rear parking. And then the last slide provides just a map of the neighborhood with some contextual analysis of the zone. So property 29 in the middle of the page is the property that requires, or that we're proposing severance. You can see it's double the width of the properties immediately to the south. On the street one over on Champlain, there's also properties essentially half the width of 29. And then two more clusters of properties to the south and on the opposite side of the street on Langevin. One thing additionally that I'll note is the properties to the south are in the R3 zone, and that R3 zone in fact permits all of the provisions we're asking for through variances on 29 Langevin, which happens to be in an R4 zone. So it's a bit of a mixed context. But there's a strong precedent in the immediate neighborhood for the provisions we're requesting, which is approximately slightly over 7.5 meters of lot width and corresponding lot area.
Building Code Services requested a spatial separation analysis of the north elevation be undertaken. Has that been done?
We will undertake that to ensure that the openings do not exceed the required zone.
Okay. Yeah, because they've requested that as a condition. And forestry has noted that the city-owned tree, red maple, located on the right away in front of the property is going to be negatively impacted by this development. Are you doing anything to protect that tree during construction?
So we'll engage the services of an arborist and ask for his input on protective measures to ensure that tree is not negatively impacted by the proposed construction.
There's also from forestry a request for a tree disclosure report required at the time of the grading plan submission.
Understood, and our arborist will provide that as well.
Okay, and I have a question for Pete. And just wondering why the tree disclosure report is not one of the conditions that the department has requested.
Staff, we will just take direction of forestry at this point. Although perhaps the development may impact the tree, the reason forestry had asked for a tree disclosure report is to perhaps look the tree like for further recommendations, and perhaps they can think of salvaging the tree while still maintaining the proposal.
Okay. All right, so it's not necessary to have this as a condition of approval?
We wouldn't impose it as a condition. We would just require it at the time on grading and drainage plan. Okay.
All right. Thank you. So regarding the conditions that have been attached to this application, I'll just go through them very quickly. Cash in lieu, independent services, grading and drainage plan, joint use and maintenance agreement, a noise warning on title for the existing dwelling, and what staff has identified as either a noise study or the provision for adding central air in the proposed dwelling. The majority of the committee doesn't feel that a noise study is really necessary in this case, and that a provision for adding central air to the proposed dwelling would be adequate as a condition. The next condition is a spatial separation analysis, which you've indicated that will be done. And you're obviously aware that Bell says is an easement that needs that they request for their protection of existing facilities. I'm assuming you're aware of that as well.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any of the members have any questions or comments regarding this application? All right. Are we prepared to?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I believe Ms. McLean and Mr. Wilder both have their hands
Okay,
raised.
I didn't see their hands up. All right, Ms. McLean, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Duckworth, I'm a little concerned about the proposed irregular severance line and the parking layout, which would require the parking space to the existing house to back up almost to the back of the house before going on to the right of way. In other words, it would take up a lot of the backyard amenity space for the existing house. Just wondered if you had investigated a different type of parking layout plan.
In response to that, the reason for the irregular severance line proposed is to ensure that there's adequate turning radiuses for vehicles to access both parking spaces. And we investigated positioning the garage and the severance line along the middle in a more conventional strategy, and found that access to the garage bays would be problematic and difficult to obtain. So our intent in this case was to improve that the turning radius of the vehicles by creating the opposite. We found that since there's no intention to alter the dimensions of the existing home, and it has a substantial rear yard setback that far exceeds the zoning requirement, we found that that property could accommodate the extra space for car maneuvering.
There's no opportunity. In other words, the parking space for the existing house would presumably be paved. The backup radius would be paved, and there would be no backyard for the existing house. Is there an ability to put the proposed parking for the new house over onto more of its backyard, or that's not possible?
I don't believe so. The lane access to the garage space for the existing house will be only as significant as needs to be to provide the parking itself, and all of the balance will be retained for exterior amenity. So we're through our study of the vehicle movement, we allowed for room for the car to essentially do a bit of an S-curve into that garage, and then room for it to back up by the same method, and the balance of that yard will be retained as amenity yard.
Is there any chance the right-of-way could be extended a little further along so that the backing up of that car for the existing house can turn into it a little further?
We could extend that jog towards the back of the property if the committee felt that was more beneficial to the project as a whole.
It's just a comment I had. Thank you.
Yeah, perhaps in line with the back of the proposed house. But the reality is that we're going to travel.
Thank you.
And another member also had questions, I believe. Yes, no?
I have just a question, just to get back to that tree report, disclosure report. I can appreciate forestry wanting to have the report at the time of grading, when you submit your grading report. Would you have any objection to having the report, the tree report, as part of a condition of the approval? I don't know at what point where you are right now with that tree report.
We're content to keep it as advised by city planning, which would be for it to be a part of the grading process. That would be our preference.
All right, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the members? So exactly how does this application meet the 4 tests?
Sorry, you cut out a little bit there, but 4 tests?
Yeah, please address the 4 tests briefly during this application.
Sure. So we believe the variances are minor in nature, particularly as the zoning provisions we're proposing are present as part of the immediate context of the site. It'll allow essentially for the continuation of a well-established pattern on the street, and therefore we find the variances to be minor. We feel they're desirable in that they'll facilitate the development of a vacant piece of land in the neighborhood. Effectively, we have a double wide lot that is only half being used, and so the addition of additional dwelling we find to be desirable. The general intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained in that the proposed new house is consistent in scale and use from the existing pattern on the street. And in terms of the official plan, the intent is maintained in that it's, again, the development of a vacant piece of land and a responsible addition of density within the neighborhood.
Thank you for that. Are we prepared to vote on this application, ladies and gentlemen? All in favor of the application with that change in the condition to eliminate the noise study and just have a provision for adding central air in the proposed dwelling. All in favor of the application as amended with the amended conditions?
Yes.
Okay, we're all good. All right. Your application is approved. Thank you. Good luck with your project, gentlemen.
Mr. Chair.
All right, the next application we have before us are items 8 and 9 on the list. 121 Parkdale and 99 Parkdale. Is Mr. Rivet there?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Can everybody hear me fine?
Yeah, and I'm going to have to administer the declaration. Now, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
You swear? All right, thank you. 2 applications and for this property, and if you'd like to proceed with your presentation, Mr. Rivet.
Yes, so these applications will be presented concurrently, and you'll understand why as we go through these. So 121 and 99 Parkdale Avenue, and if we can just change the slide, please. So
and for your information, Rogers wants the easement for 121 Parkdale to be maintained. It's an existing easement.
Yes, we're aware of that.
Okay. You're aware of their request?
We are.
Okay. Please proceed.
Not too sure if you can open the 4th slide for me. Oh, back up. One more back, please. Okay, well, that one doesn't seem to be working. Maybe it's too much memory. We can go to the next one, that's fine. So the property is 99 121 Parkdale. So both properties are within this blue box, which is basically just across Tooney's pasture. And you can see it's in the Burn community. So it's at the corner of Burnside and Parkdale, just at the end of Going By driveway. You can change, please. So what we have here is the site plan. So just to let committee know, we've gone through the City of Ottawa approval process for the site plan. staff are preparing the delegated authority report pending the outcome of these variances and easements. So we have submitted all final drawings, and all of these variances and easements have been reviewed and discussed with both committee and staff at the city. Okay. You can change, please. So I won't go through all of these drawings. I just brought them in there in case we need to make reference to them depending on if there's any specific questions, but we'll just go through these. And again, if we need to refer to any of these, I can bring you back through these. They are taking a lot of memory and they don't seem to be coming well through the video here. So we can just proceed maybe to page slide 12, if you don't mind. One more. All right. Oh. Doesn't seem like your PowerPoint's loading the images. Well, while that happens, I'll just confirm or indicate what the easements are. So the first easement that's being requested is to establish a right-of-way over the outside portion of the driveway that presently goes into 121 Parkdale, which is part 4 of the draft R plan that was prepared. That part basically is to get access into the underground parking structure at 121 Parkdale. So 121 Parkdale is currently under construction. It's a 32-story office building also being built by Bridgeau. And the subject property and the project 99 Parkdale will be accessed via the underground parking structure from 121. So it's a fairly straightforward, more of a legal matter in terms of granting an easement for that outside portion. And if I'll just go through without the presentation just for now so we can proceed. So application B-0060, oh, here we go. There's my location plan. We can just move to slide 12 if you can without freezing the system. Okay, well, I'll continue with a verbal explanation. The second consent for easement application is an easement to grant a permanent encroachment agreement. So 121 Parkdale, as I indicated, is a 32-story office building, which is under construction right now. It's built slightly off the north property line. As 99 Parkdale is going to be built with a common wall with 121 Parkdale, it was recommended through discussion with our solicitor that we entertain an encroachment agreement via an easement approach. So 99 Parkdale will slightly be encroaching onto 121 Parkdale in order for its foundation wall to abut the existing wall of 121. So that's the second easement request. So I'm not too sure if we're able to.
And what's the reason? And what's the reason for that easement request?
So the first one is because there is no driveway leading to the underground parking structure being proposed at 99 Parkdale. It's going to be accessed via the existing parking structure at 121. So in order for 99 Parkdale to be able to access its underground parking structure, it needs an easement over the 121. The second one is in order for 99 Parkdale to be able to build up to the existing wall at 121 Parkdale, it will slightly encroach onto 121 Parkdale. So the second easement is to permit that permanent encroachment.
So there won't be any gap between the buildings.
That's correct. Okay. So I had a few images that basically just showed you the existing driveway at 121. Oh, you're close. Okay, 2 more. Oh, you jumped too much. Oh. Can you keep moving forward, please? Again, slowly. Okay, that's great. So in yellow here is the part 4, which is the portion that's going to be subject to this easement. So that is basically the outside portion of the driveway leading into the parking structure at 121. So that residential tower is currently under construction. If you go to the next slide, please. So again, the same yellow here is that entrance on 121 Parkdale, and you see it basically making its way underground into 99 Parkdale. Move forward. And that's just the R plan that shows you that the easement is only for the outside portion of the building, so it's just that part 4. Next. So the second easement that I had discussed, you can see here part 3. You can see the existing wall, parking structure and wall of 121 Parkdale. It's the darker line with the hatchwork on it, and it's slightly built off the property line. So in order for 99 Parkdale to be able to have 0 lot line, or not 0, basically common wall, we need to encroach onto that 121. So we'll be explaining a bit more of the project at 99 Parkdale as we move forward with this presentation. Right. So as indicated by Mr. Chairman, the goal is to basically have both buildings combined, have 0 lot line. The idea there is to have a continuous wall, and the rooftop patio on the podium is actually an amenity area which will be shared by both buildings. So to have a 1 meter gap or any gap is not practical, and there's problems associated with that. So the idea is to have both buildings basically merged together. Okay. Next, please. So in order to develop 99 Parkdale in this fashion, there are 6 minor variances that are required. Most of them are very minor and actually technical in nature in regards with either interpretation or just how the bylaw is set up. And it was felt in discussions with both the planning department and the building department that variances should be sought for these just to avoid any complications at time of building permit. So I'll just walk the committee through them quickly, and I'll show them and explain how they meet the 4 tests. So again, the first one is to permit a 0 meter southern interior side yard setback. And this area is actually site-specific zoning with an actual schedule that had shrink-wrapped the previous building. I'll get into that a little more in a bit. It's to permit a drive aisle leading to the underground parking. So this is, again, very technical because the bylaw actually requires that you have your own driveway. So by having my access on the abutting property, I need to get a variance for that. To permit 78 motor parking spaces to be reduced 2.4 meters and by 4.6 meters. So those are actually the small vehicle sizes. But in this case, because of the parking requirements being 0, we actually have to ask for a minor variance because they're not the required spaces being 0. They're actually provided spaces. So I'll explain that as well. To permit a walkway width of 4.5 meters where the R5 zone requires a walkway width of 1.8 meters. To permit bicycle parking space width of 0.49 meters for stacked bicycle parking spaces. Again, this is just something that's a bit of an anomaly in the bylaw that one of the new ways of parking bicycles is by having them stacked. And the current bicycle parking provisions haven't accounted for that type of setup. And it's to permit 10% of the lot area to be landscaped area, whereas the bylaw requires 30%. And I'll explain that again, but again, this property was shrink wrapped. It was previously approved as a Barry Hoban architecture project. When it was Urbandale that was the owners. Brazil recently purchased the property and are now bringing a building forward under Mr. Leahy's signature. Next, please. So the first relief, as I indicated, is to permit a 0 meter southern interior yard setback. And this is to permit area A to extend to the lot line. So as you can see, this site was shrink wrapped, meaning that the open space area is the area that's labeled C on this drawing. The podium level is what was identified as A, and the tower level was identified as D. So very, very shrink wrapped based on an approved site plan. Because we are now bringing this building, because now Grigil owns both properties, and the intent is to have them both work as one site, yet still maintain individual ownerships. A variance is required to basically bring that sector A or area A right up to the lot line. It was also felt in discussion with staff that because area C was specifically identified for open space, that we should also indicate that the permission or the variance would also basically be going into that area C. So that's what relief 0 is for.
Okay.
Next, please. So we've seen this slide already. This is basically the same intent or the same rationale as for the easement. So it brings the building right up to 121 Parkdale. Next, please. So again, as I indicated, this will basically bring both buildings together, and it will basically permit the podiums at 99 and 121 to be shared between both buildings. The 1 meter gap was felt to be problematic due to snow accumulation and waste as well, and was discussed through SEPTED comments that it was also recommended to avoid having the 1 meter gap. For various reasons, for obvious reasons, it was considered minor and desirable to have that 0 meter setback between both properties. Next, please. So relief, so variance B, again, this one is very technical in nature. This one is to permit the drive aisle leading to the underground parking garage to be located on the abutting 121 Parkdale, whereas the zoning bylaw requires that the aisle be located on the same lot. So it's very technical. It's really just to be able to permit my access to be coming off of 121. This was deemed to be both minor and desirable in discussion with the community association as well. There was concerns with traffic and the amount of in and outs on the laneway. So by doing this would actually restrict or limit the number of driveway points coming onto that laneway. Relief C is to permit 78 motor parking spaces to be reduced to a minimum width of 2.4 meters and a minimum length of 4.6 meters. So those are actually the small car provisions in the zoning bylaw. So rather than identify them as small car parking spaces, it was felt that we would just request a minor variance to reduce them. Again, these were deemed to be minor and desirable because they basically, the reason that these were required to be reduced as well was because we needed to provide a road widening. So by doing the road widening, that slightly affected the foundation wall, which in the basement footprint required that these spaces be reduced.
You have a schematic of the garage showing those spaces?
Yes, so if we go back to slide 7. So while you make your way to slide 7, so it's the parking spaces that'll be abutting and the underground, but abutting Parkdale. None of the visitor spaces are being reduced in size. It's really just those that were abutting Parkdale. Those were highlighted on a plan and provided to committee, but unfortunately, with COVID now we're going through this screen approach, but they are the ones that are identified on the various parking levels.
So they're not going to be on all on the same level?
They're on multiple levels, correct. So most of the visitor spaces were provided on the first level of underground parking and the accessible spaces. And then on the other floors, P2, through to P5, as well as the 6 stories of underground parking. That most of those reduced spaces are the ones that are along the Parkdale frontage.
And you said that the visitor parking spaces are going to be the standard size?
Visitor parking and accessible are not being affected. So the visitor spaces and the accessible spaces are going to be on the P1 level, and those are not being reduced in size.
And what's the width of the drive aisle in the garage? Are they? There's no variance for that, so
no, I believe it's 6 meters. Yeah, 6 meters.
Okay. And my question is, you know, you're providing 78 spaces with a reduced size, which quite frankly wouldn't fit a pickup truck, a minivan, or a large SUV. How are you going to ensure, or how is the property owner going to ensure that those spaces are only used by small cars?
So on the site plan, there is signage for those as well. And what's important to note here is, of these parking spaces, the required parking for this building is actually 0 because of its proximity to the LRT station. The owner has decided to provide parking just because there's still a demand, and it is a rental building. There is still a demand, but he is trying to reduce the number of parking, and that was also something that was strongly requested by the ward councillor and the community association to try to limit the number of parking spaces. And what we've done is we've greatly increased the number of visitor parking spaces. But in short, the required accessible spaces, required visitor spaces are being met to code. It's just some of these additional parking spaces that, because of the road widening, it wasn't possible to modify the footprint, are requiring this variance.
And you're satisfied that the functionality of the garage is ensured, even though you've reduced the parking space size?
Yeah. So the architect has also looked at that, and we're strategically located in areas where they would avoid either pillars or storage areas, and we did locate them in a way that would have minimal impacts, even if they were reduced.
Hi, Mark. This is James Gerwin from RLA here. Just to add to that, I'm the architect on the project. Mark's correct. Approximately 40% of the provided parking below grade, excluding the visitor parking and the barrier-free parking, is of the reduced size. The remaining 60% meets the standard city bylaws.
Okay, thank you.
So variance D is to permit a walkway width of 4.5 meters, whereas the bylaw requires, to permit a walkway width of 4.5 meters, whereas the bylaw requires that in an R5 zone, a walkway permitted in any yard is permitted in any yards, but provided it does not exceed 1.8 meters in width. So again, this building is being developed in a similar fashion to 121, which is the abutting property. 121 Parkdale, however, was in a mixed use zone, which didn't have the specific R5 zone requirement. So it was just discovered that because of this R5 requirement to continue the same streetscape and same entrance design as 121, it was felt minor and desirable to request this variance because it'll basically permit a continuity of the same streetscape that's along 121. So you can see on the, very blurry here though, but the image in the middle is the landscaping being proposed at 99 Parkdale, and that's actually the same extension of the design that has been recently approved at 121 Parkdale.
Okay.
If we can go to the next page, please. So this one again is very, very minor and very desirable, both at the request of the ward councillor and the community to provide a large quantity of bicycle parking spaces. So what you see in the picture here, which is a little difficult to see on the screen, there you go. It's actually a fairly innovative bicycle parking system where some of them are wall mounted or some of them are actually stacked via kind of a lever system where the second level bicycle is stacked. So this permits us to actually provide way more parking, bicycle parking in the parking structure, which was felt to be very desirable from the community. And the variance itself is very minor. It's to reduce or to permit the width to be 0.49 meters, whereas the bylaw requires 0.6 meters. So there, we did speak to the supplier, and we did look. There's actually a video showing how this system works. The aisleway around these areas is not being modified. There's still sufficient room to actually operate this type of structure and or parking arrangement. So it was felt very minor, and in discussions with the Seat of Ottawa, this is also something that will be looked at as part of the upcoming zoning review, because it's definitely something that is supported and promoted by the city.
Okay.
Relief F is the final one. So this is to permit 10% of the lot area, or approximately 137.27 square meters, to be landscaped area, whereas the zoning bylaw requires 30% of the lot area to be provided as landscaped area for a lot containing an apartment dwelling high-rise. This reduction was reviewed, again, it's a question of interpretation. Staff felt that the landscaping needed to be on ground level, and it's somewhat of a new interpretation. Rather than arguing it, we just agreed that yes, we can provide a minor variance for that as well. The rooftop of the podium is actually a very large landscaped area as well, with outdoor garden features and amenity areas, which will provide way in excess of.
How large?
The rooftop of the second. James, would you have that offhand? But I know when we calculated it, it resulted in an excess of 30%. So I would say.
Yeah, that's correct. On the third floor podium, it's roughly 250 meters squared.
Okay. And then there's another rooftop podium, or another rooftop terrace on the rooftop, which also provides open space. So this again was something that was felt to be minor and desirable, because it basically still provides that amount of landscaped open space. And in discussion with city staff, it was agreed that we would look at having some kind of green features or planting beds and so on that rooftop area. And again, the Barry Hoban site plan had actually been approved as well, with the rooftop of the terrace and the rooftop of the podium being counted as landscaped open space, with the same building footprint that we have. So it was felt basically minor and desirable. It was just a request of the planner that it would not be counted at ground level only.
Okay.
So in terms of so I've gone through those and explained why they're minor and desirable individually. When you look at them as a whole, these two remaining tests will demonstrate how to meet the intent of the official plan. They provide a transit supportive land use within 600 meters of the rapid transit station, provide a multi-purpose destination, adding to the housing mix of the area. These will be rental units. It's a transit-oriented development, meets the transit-oriented development guidelines. It provides pedestrian access by having straight access from the Parkdale entrance. It limits the number of driveways onto the laneway, which was a concern from the neighborhood. It provides a large quantity of bicycle parking spaces. The streetscape environment is a continuity of 121 Parkdale, which will animate the street as well. So for all of these reasons, it was deemed to be that these variances meet the intent of the official plan. In terms of the intent of the zoning bylaw, so again, this was a site-specific zone, so an R5B zone, exception 1929 with Schedule 284 with a holding provision. So Schedule 284 is the schedule. We saw that this was a shrink-wrapped building. We, in large part, are able to still fit this building within the same footprint that had been previously approved, save and except for that 0-yard setback along the 121 Parkdale property line. It provides a very interesting building in terms of podium and tower, and it basically continues the design from 121. It was reviewed also by the Urban Design Review Panel, and as indicated, city staff have finalized their review of the site plan and are preparing the delegated authority report pending the approval of these variances. that concludes my presentation. We are here, and I do also have Mr. Michael Polwin on the phone if there's any legal questions in regards to the easements. But as you saw, James Garwin is here from Leahy's office, and myself, we can answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you for your presentation. Any questions, comments from members of the committee? Mr. Wilder.
With regards to variance C for 99 Parkdale, it's quite a number of units that you're asking for a reduction, 78 spaces. I mean, are you planning to put a big sign up saying small cars only? Certainly you're not going to have a Murano, an SUV, for example, parking in these 78 spaces, right? Looking for smart cars, small cars, because that's a concern of mine. If it was 20, 30, you're looking at 78 spaces, which, you know, if you try and put an SUV or a van, anything longer, it's going to be sticking out, obviously. If you can reply.
Yes, so I also asked maybe James to assist in the response, but as James indicated, it's only about 40% of the parking spaces that will be reduced. As I indicated, none of these are actually required. It's the owner that has decided to provide these. They will be advertised as small car parking spaces, and as part of the rental agreement, it's something that Brazil's office will have to manage as well with its tenants. In addition, although there is always a parking demand, the goal really here is to support transit-oriented development. The owner is actually working with OC Transpo and will actually be providing incentives to its tenants in terms of bus passes or Presto related cars and things like that to basically also support transit. But to answer your question, they will be advertised as small car parking spaces. It is about 40% of the provided spaces. And there shouldn't be, you know, they will have to be limited to smaller cars. That's the intent of them. So it's something Brazil will have to coordinate.
I can appreciate that. I mean, it goes back to what you said in terms of supporting public transit. You're so close to public transit. It almost begs the question between the two towers, why you need as much parking as you do, and why you're not even asked. Well, anyway, I won't go there, but you're going to be providing these here somehow. Brazil wants to get revenue from them. They're not going to be left empty, obviously. I trust you're going to find 78 vehicles that are going to fit into these smaller spaces.
Anything further, Mr. Wilder? I have a question regarding the parking, given the fact that we're directly across the street from Tunney's Pasture. I'm assuming that none of these spaces are going to be rented to people who actually work at Tunney's Pasture?
That has not come up. I can't speak for the owner. I believe I had requested Brazil be on the call. I'm not sure if Jean-Luc, who's the director of development, is on or not. That has not been proposed or discussed either through discussions with the community or the councillor or Brazil. So at this point, I can't say.
My comment is, if you want to really support public transit, then none of those spaces get rented to Tunney's Pasture employees.
Mr. Chair, if I may, the property isn't zoned for a public parking lot.
Okay.
And renting more than 4 spaces for public use would render it a public parking lot. So that's not a concern.
Okay. All right. Ms. McLean had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Rivet or Mr. Polwin, I'm a bit perplexed about allowing one property owner to build across a property line, which is what you're proposing for the easements. So can you just take me, are these going to be condominiums, and could it be done through condominium, or was there any thought given to selling part 3 to 99 Parkdale?
I will let Mr. Polwin answer that, because this was discussed. Initially, the approach was to do a lot line adjustment. And Mr. Polwin, in his research and his knowledge, will be able to answer and clarify why it is we're proceeding in this fashion.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and Ms. McLean, nice to speak to you again. The answer is, firstly, this is extremely common, particularly in older areas of the city, where you have buildings that cross property lines, probably not intentionally, but it does exist in a host of places. The reason that I suggested that it be done this way is that each of these buildings are whole lots on a plan of subdivision. And they are going to be owned by a common owner. If you preserve the whole lot on a plan of subdivision, if at some point in the future Brazil chooses to sell one or the other, subject to the easements that exist, it would not have to come back to the committee for a consent. But if you break up the whole lot on a plan of subdivision, then you have the problem of owning the fee simple on the adjacent property. And you would not have the protections granted by the Planning Act for the conveyance of whole lots on a plan of subdivision. So while I'm informed that Brazil has no intention of doing that, it does allow them to separately mortgage the properties, and it allows them to convey one or the other in the future without the need of having to come back to the committee, because there will be no merger of the title on of the two properties.
I'm a bit reluctant to support the part 3 on that basis, because I think there are other options available. Will these be condominiums?
No, ma'am, they will not. They're rental residential. They will not be condominium. Going condominium to do something like this is extremely onerous to achieve one small part of this. Going condominium requires reserve fund studies, requires the creation of units, requires a burden that a rental residential property does not want to bear. But encroaching on adjacent property, as I say, is not unusual in the least. It happens all the time.
But this is new construction, so I'll just leave it there. But can you confirm to me that part 4 is an at-grade easement? And is part 3 an at-grade easement right away?
Mark, I don't have the parts in front of me. Is part 4 the
driveway?
driveway?
Part four is the outside portion of the driveway. It was actually vertically surveyed by Eagerwire, and part 3 is also vertical survey as well, where it also covers the 6 stories of underground parking structure and the 2 stories of podium.
So they're stratified, Ms. McLean.
They're surface easements or they're stratified easements?
They're stratified.
And the authority for the committee to grant a stratified easement, Mr. Paluan, I guess?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm given to understand that the committee has in fact received an opinion from Mr. Mark at the city indicating there's no restriction in the Planning Act for the granting of stratified easements or the granting of any form of stratified consent. I'm aware that the committee has done this in Ottawa, and indeed the City of Ottawa, through part lot control exemption, has done the same thing in files in which I've been involved. There's no specific authority in the Planning Act because the Planning Act operates on prohibition. And so if the committee were not to have the authority to do so, it would have to be laid out in a prohibition contained in the Planning Act. There is no such prohibition.
Thank you.
Ms. Oak Sharon had a question or comment as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if we could hear from the planning department on variance F with regard to the intent of the bylaw for the landscaping to be at ground level. Just to confirm the interpretation.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, the interpretation was that the requirement of the 30% of the landscape area was to be at grade because it will enhance the public realm, and because they were providing 10% granted due to the design of the building, there's a little bit of restrictions on the amount of landscape they can provide. We advise the applicant to also apply for this variance, although we do recognize that there are other areas within the building that are being landscaped, and that somehow they could provide that extra area. The fact is that only 10% of that is at grade, and that's sort of the only area that's having relationship to with the street.
Thank you. Maybe just a follow up to the applicant to ask whether the area on the podium is accessible to the public.
No, so the area on the podium is not accessible to the public. What I'd like to point out though is the site-specific zone that was approved already for this site back in 2012 would not even have 30% landscapes open space at the ground. When we did the Urbandale approval back in 2012, it was not a question of the landscaping having to be at ground. This is a new interpretation. The definition for landscape open space does not say that it has to be at ground. It's just something that staff have recently interpreted that way. So as I indicated, the site plan that already had approval, delegated approval with the Urbandale design was also using the same concept of using the podium as the difference to maintain or to meet that 30% requirement.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from committee members? I'd like to, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to reserve on this so that we can discuss this whole stratified easement thing that Plain has raised. We okay to reserve on this? All in favor? Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentations. Very thorough. Very well done. We will reserve on this application, and you'll receive notice within 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And the final application, which we will deal with today, is item 11 on the agenda, 294 Mackay Street. And if the agent is there, we have to go through the declaration again.
Hello again, Mr. Chair and the committee.
All right, here we go again. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
I do.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Duckworth, this is an application which, as you know, was originally before us in January. It's an application for minor variance to permit parking access from Mackay Street for a space located partially in the interior side yard, a reduced lot width, reduced rear and interior side yards, a reduced depth for a common wall, and an increased balcony projection. It is proposed to demolish the existing duplex dwelling and detached garage and construct a new 3-story long semi-detached dwelling.
That's correct.
Okay. I should note that apparently there was a sign mix-up. The correct sign was, and you can confirm this, was erected on Mackay, Well, it looks like the wrong sign went up on Taylor Lane, but was replaced with a correct sign. Am I correct in that?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. It wasn't, the two signs were clipped together, and it wasn't discovered immediately when our contractor posted them. But when it was brought to our attention, we asked for the committee to provide a correct second sign, and that was quickly posted on site.
Okay. All right. All right, Mr. Duckworth, if you'd like to proceed, and again, I'm not hearing you terribly well. You guys might want to change your setup for the next hearing that you're in front of us for.
Okay, I'll try and speak up. I don't want to tinker with my equipment on the floor.
Yeah, no, not right, not today.
Quickly state as well, I'm joined in this hearing by my colleague Barry Hoban, as well as Mr. Daniel Belmar, who is one of the owners of the property.
Please proceed.
Okay. So as you mentioned, the proposal is for a long semi-detached dwelling to front to back semi-detached to replace the existing duplex dwelling on the property. The neighborhood has a diverse mix of house types ranging from single-family homes, semi-detached and townhomes, as well as condo units, all within the immediate vicinity. There's also a rear lane on the property, or accessing the property, that runs parallel to Mackay. This lane provides parking access for various properties, and it also provides sole frontage for some dwellings as well. Through our design studies and our analysis of the neighborhood, as well as our consultation with city planning staff, we determined the long semi to be the best fit for the property. The form of the long semi-detached has been contemplated by the zoning bylaw for a few years. And we saw this as an opportunity to preserve the density that already exists on the site with two dwelling units, replacing the aging duplex on the site. So we've received quite a few letters regarding the application between the original January date and today. Some of these have been in support of the project, and some others have been expressing concerns. So I'd like to just briefly address some of the concerns that have been raised.
Yes, please do.
First concern I'd like to speak to relates to variance A, which is the request for parking access to be granted on Mackay Street. The bylaw states, and the planner's comments note that the bylaw states that when a rear lane is present, providing access to a lot, that any parking access must be provided by that rear lane. Our position, we believe that this doesn't accurately or adequately accommodate for the long semi-detached form or configuration. Inherently, a long semi-detached severs the property front to back. And this property will be severed in that manner with a flag lot configuration. And when that severance takes place, the front unit will not have access to the rear lane. So the provision that requires a property to provide access from the rear when it has access, in fact, this property, the front unit, will not have access to the rear lane when the severance is complete. As one would assume, the front unit will have access to the front facing street, which will be Mackay, and the rear unit will have primary access to Taylor Lane, where its parking will be accessed. With the flag lot configuration, there will be a small amount of frontage provided to the rear lane on Mackay, primarily for servicing and also for addressing. But functionally, the main access for the rear unit will be on Taylor, and the sole access for the front unit will be on Mackay. So with this in mind, we believe that the most logical and the most desirable organization of parking for the project is for the front unit to have a laneway access off of Mackay, and the rear unit to have similar access for parking off of the laneway. If we could move on just to the rendering, which I believe is the next slide, it just shows the front image of the on Mackay. Are we able to advance the image? There we go. Thank you. So this is a rendering of the proposed development on Mackay Street. We're proposing a single laneway to be the narrowest possible laneway that the zone permits, which is 2.6 meters. We're proposing for this laneway to actually be designed in such a way with pavers that integrate into the landscape to make it feel more like a landscape element rather than an asphalt driveway. This is done intentionally to soften its impact and create more cohesion between the front lawn and the laneway. We've also, as a design strategy, chosen for the parking space that this laneway provides access to be an open carport rather than a garage. We feel that the open carport will have less visual impact on the front elevation on the streetscape than would a garage door. So these are some of the design strategies we're implementing to make it more desirable for this configuration to be on Mackay. If we could advance, there's a context plan I included with the package that looks at the broader neighborhood properties. Because I'd just like to mention with that context plan, two neighbors to our southwest, 296 Mackay and 298 Mackay, are relevant examples because they each provide similar laneways off of Mackay Street. I believe in those cases it's front yard parking, but ultimately there are laneway access points that are used for cars on each of those properties. The context plan will show that. And then one more point I'd like to make about the immediate neighbor, which is 296 Mackay. It's actually in some ways prototypical for what we're proposing to do on this site because that site has in fact been severed at some point in the past, front to back. And the rear lane now provides access to a house addressed at 1 Taylor Lane, which has been severed off of the property. And so we end up with a situation on that property where the front house on 296 Mackay has parking access off of Mackay, and the rear house has separate parking access for it off of Taylor Lane, which is very, very comparable to what we would like to establish on this property. I'm not sure if we're able to advance the slides. Is there technical difficulty on the slideshow? Is everyone still able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I'll move on, hoping the visuals are able to catch up. So keeping in mind those examples of our immediate neighbors and their similar parking configurations to what we're proposing, I'll move on to speaking to the other variance that pertains to the proposed parking on Mackay, which is with respect to the findings of the streetscape character analysis. And this is variance H on the list of variances. So the planning department has noted that the findings of the streetscape character analysis have determined that of the 17 properties in the analysis, the majority of those properties do not have parking access off of Mackay. I've sent a separate covering letter to the committee in the past, but I'll just review my points from that letter. But in short, we find that the findings of the streetscape character analysis are actually opposite the actual context in the property, or in the context. The 17 properties we analyzed, with the purpose of finding what the majority pattern is. Of those properties, 9 properties have laneways off of Mackay and 8 do not. So there is a majority of properties that provide parking access off of Mackay, 9 with laneways and 8 without. The reason the findings of the streetscape character analysis determined that 8 is in fact the majority is because there's a somewhat arbitrary requirement that laneways be separated into different groups based on width. This is the context plan that I was referring to previously. So of the 9 properties that have laneways, 6 of those have single wide laneways for a single car, and 3 of them have double wide laneways. And rather than taking that as a cumulative group of 9, the streetscape character analysis forces us to look at each of those 2 categories of driveways separately, and therefore the 8 properties without driveways are seen to be larger than either of those groups and interpreted as the dominant pattern in the context. I think it seems fairly disingenuous and not true to the intent of the bylaw, which is to determine what is the real world context in this. And the fact that more properties have laneways than don't seems more relevant than the width of those laneways themselves. So with that in mind, we believe that in fact to provide a laneway on Mackay for this property would be in fact within the dominant pattern, the true dominant pattern of the street. If I could move on to speak to some of the other comments that have come in. In particular, they relate to setbacks, various setbacks that we're proposing for the property. We received a letter from our neighbor at 64 Dufferin. This slide is good for now. Our neighbor at 64 Dufferin, Mr. Lapointe, has written a letter to the committee expressing concerns regarding the side yard setback that we're proposing adjacent to his property. The zoning bylaw requires a 1.2 meter side yard, and we're proposing a 0.6 meter side yard adjacent to this property. We've met with and corresponded with Mr. Lapointe a few times through the course of preparing for this hearing. We've heard his concerns with respect to the construction process and living next to a construction site. We're sensitive to his concerns, and particularly because he's lived through an adjacent construction project once and has apprehensions about doing so again. Part of our conversation dealt just strictly with trying to be a good neighbor and providing with him options with which we can proceed to minimize the impact on his property. We talked about the possibility of shoring our excavation so that excavation would be entirely contained on our property and not affect his fence or his grade. We talked about, and our client, the owner of the property, has offered to reinstate and even improve upon any landscape element that might be affected by the construction of the property. And we've also talked about, though Mr. Lapointe didn't seem interested in the idea, that in our design we're proposing a rooftop access which has a permitted projection for the stair access adjacent to his property. We actually offered and are willing to carry out this offer that we would actually remove the roof terrace and the roof terrace access, given that this extra volume would be directly adjacent to his property, and by its removal would reduce the impact on his property. So those are some of the things that we discussed and are committed to undertaking if this project is able to proceed as designed. A couple other points I'll make with respect to the side yard setback is that this bylaw requirement for a 1.2 meter side yard is only in effect because what we're proposing is a semi-detached dwelling. In this zone, this R4 zone, as of right, if this was a detached dwelling, we would be permitted a 0.6 meter side yard on one side and a 1.2 meter side yard on the other. Again, I believe the bylaw doesn't fully recognize the configuration of a long semi-detached. Usually a semi-detached only has one side yard, and so its bylaw says that side yard must be 1.2. But in this case, the configuration of a long semi is much more akin to a single family home. It has side yards on both sides of the property. And therefore, we believe the provisions for a single family home with respect to side yards are relevant in this case. And again, as of right, a single family home could build to within 0.6 meters of this lot line without a minor variance. I'll also just quickly point out, though we're trying to improve on the standards of the existing non-conforming duplex, the existing building has less than a 0.6 meter side yard, actually on both side yards currently. So what we're proposing would certainly be moving towards compliance to the bylaw. The last comment I'll make is to address comments we've received regarding the setback of the garage on Taylor Lane. We received comments from our neighbors at 68 Taylor Lane who have concerns regarding the safety of a garage that will be, as proposed, within 1.2 meters of the rear lot line. I'll note quickly again two things. First of all, existing context, and you can see it in the site plan, the dotted line at the top of the page is in fact an existing garage that crosses the lot line into the right-of-way of Taylor Lane. What we're proposing will not only pull back 1.2 meters from the rear lot line for the access point to the garage, but in fact it will be fully within the property, which the current garage is not. There are other garages on Taylor Lane. At least one of them, I believe a two-car garage, which we have a photograph of, also appears to extend right to the lot line as well. The second point I'll make again is with respect to as of right in the zoning bylaw. And again, if we were looking at a single-family home with a detached garage on this property, we would be permitted to build a detached garage, could be two-car if we wished it to be, that would be within 0.6 meters of the rear lot line as a detached structure, but again with only essentially a 2-foot setback to the lot line. So what we're proposing, granted it's a small setback, but I think a meaningful setback given the tight confines of this neighborhood and of this context. So I guess to summarize, we were mindful of the various factors at play within this fairly tight, fairly dense cluster of buildings within the block that we're looking at. And we feel that the configuration we propose and the variances we're proposing are they do meet the 4 tests. We feel that they're in keeping with the context of the neighborhood. Again, recognizing a diverse mix of house types and house forms, a diverse mix of setbacks as well. It preserves the density that exists on the site through the form of a semi-detached, and we feel that in that sense it's appropriate for the context and it meets the 4 tests.
I have a question regarding the setbacks on Taylor Lane. I'm just looking at the map showing the 60-meter notification circle. 64 Dufferin, and I guess it's 1 Taylor Lane, which is on the opposite side of the property, appear to be right on the edge of the traveled lane. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Any setback there at all?
I believe they're at least on the setback line, and it's possible they cross it, but at least they would be on the setback line. You're correct.
So, and what you're proposing is going to be set back further than those two buildings from Taylor Lane?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right. Any, does the planning department like to comment on this application?
If I may, Mr. Chair, as you know, the department has some concerns, mainly with variance A and H, and those are pertinent to the proposed parking space at the front. The mature neighborhood overlay states that when parking is provided, it has to be based on the dominant pattern from the streetscape character analysis. In this case, the majority is a streetscape character analysis that says no parking to be provided. Additionally, I understand that there had been a count of 9 driveways over 8 houses not having front yard parking. However, there's also another provision on the mature neighborhood overlay that says, despite subsection 139.8, which states that you have to provide parking in accordance to the streetscape character analysis, there's other provisions is that when there is a travel lane, that parking space has to be provided through the travel lane. So in this case, if the character group were to permit a driveway to be accessed from the main street, because of the other provision, the house would have to provide a driveway through the lane. Additionally, this area of the city does not require parking, so staff would prefer a design that had no parking at all or complies to the provision.
Thank you. Any comments or any questions for the applicant from the members of the committee? Hearing none, we have 3 members of the public on the speakers list. Are you there, Mr. Anson?
Yes, sir.
So
Dan Anson, 68 Dufferin.
Dufferin, okay. Right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak, and members of the committee. And Mr. Duckworth, thanks for the objective and fact-based explanation of the zoning variations being sought. So again, I think I've provided 2 letters at this point to the committee and to anyone that's shared with, it's been shared with through them. But are just trying to confine the nature of our concerns to what we are impacted by. And so we directly front Taylor Lane, so we're immediately to the east of the proposed property redesign. Our concerns relate to the proximity of the garage that would directly abut the lane itself. As Mr. Duckworth mentioned, there is another garage that does similarly abut the lane as well, but it's used as a storage space at best, and in the approximately 10 years that we've lived here, we've never seen that door move. So the lane is used extensively by pedestrians as well as our kids. Given the current zoning layout, we only have the front yard and laneway as our yard because our entire frontage is on the lane. So we have a significant amount of concerns about a garage that would open up directly onto the laneway, despite the quite reduced setback. I think that it is a small setback that is relatively consistent with some previous mistakes based on one Taylor Lane being built right to the edge, as well as one other garage that is at least 6 feet away from the lane. But recent developments such as our own see a 2-car garage directly fronting the lane with a 6-meter standoff. So I think it would be potentially unfair to require a 7.5 meter just directly addressing the reliefs being sought D and E, but I think that there's certainly room for compromise. But the distance that they've put forward and are proposing is maybe too close to have cars directly coming out onto the laneway. In addition, in compounding the issue of parking, I feel that the argument towards having parking in the front and the rear seems to be cyclic in nature, in that when justifying the front space, the argument is made that, well, but the lot will be divided and they won't have access to the rear parking. But when justifying the rear parking, it's a long semi-detached that would require it. So I think that's a bit of an issue with logic. It's our only space, and there's a significant amount of pedestrians that use it. And I think that the densification and regentrification of the neighborhood, because it's not particularly a well-used lot space right now, would require that at least some greater plans or considerations went into the amount of setback required, in addition to what is directly related to the amount of yard space, which is not necessarily our concern. It's how proximate to the laneway a garage would be. Aligned to that is our other concern about the balcony, which is being sought to go up to 0 meters from the rear lot line. So again, this relates to how much the owner and the architects wish to maximize the usage of space. As they had alluded to, I think the intent is to split the lot and build up 2 homes. In this case, trying to use the most amount of space so they could essentially put a second home in the rear of the lot, which would be a lot of usage in a relatively small amount of area. I think is difficult. But our concern is, again, to the safety and security of those using the lane. And I think that a balcony that, directly abuts or completely aligns to the lane usage would be an unnecessary risk and an unnecessary hazard. So, and I think that, to the spirit of the bylaw, I think that the reason for having those offset from property lines is to ensure that there's no hazardous use, even if it is minimal, accidental in nature. It's a reduction, it's a risk management protocol. Again, back to minor variances. In aggregate, it's a significant amount, but we encourage the redevelopment, and I'm sure, the design is certainly beyond the remit of, or beyond the scope of what we can impact. And it looks amazing, but we have significant concerns about safety and security. And to that effect, I'm sure that the committee has received a number of letters from all 4 corners of the proposed redesign. So from northwest, east, and south, our neighbors and neighbors to the south as well. So I would not say that the variances in aggregate are minor in nature. And for the community, I think that illustrates that it is not particularly desirable. I think that the reasons for which it may be or may not be determined desirable may vary, and it's certainly not up to us or to the community to determine aesthetics. That's potentially your remit, but obviously there's been a significant amount of concerns that have been raised, as well as parking seems to be a continued issue. That's it. Again, like there's a precedent set in recent years being our own. We are 6 meters away from the lane, but it's at the same time it's our kids, but we need to conform to the same kind of policies that we're prescribing for others to adhere to. So that's a kind of an overview of my concerns. And I appreciate the letter from Mr. Duckworth last night, just explaining some of the issues and point noted. But again, our concerns still stand, and I would hope that that some kind of compromise would be reached. I think that as stated, the bylaws are quite rigid, and I think that the 25% and the 7.5 meter standoff, 25% yard usage would be is probably a dated policy. But again, having a garage that directly affronts what is the only play space for at least 2 families and their small children, as well as a number of pedestrians, where no other garage is actively used to the same degree for what would potentially be either a rental property or a subdivision with a house that is very, very intensified within the usage of that lot line. So thanks very much, Mr. Chair. That's all I have for the moment.
How wide is Taylor Lane?
Wide or long? The width would be approximately, I would say 5.5 meters. I'm looking at it, it's about 12 feet, 15 feet.
Okay. And it's paved from edge to edge?
Yes, sir. Asphalt.
All right. And how many vehicles travel along that lane on a daily basis?
3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4.
So there's four vehicles that use the lane for access.
Right. So there's one two of the users have uncovered car parking spots, so they have maximum visibility of the lane, as well as pedestrians using the lane can see those. There's one garage that is towards the south end that has one user, and that one is approximately 6 feet from the lot line. And then ours is the only other user, and we have one uncovered space that directly abuts the laneway, and then we have a 2-car garage that has about a 6 meter standoff.
Okay. I'm just looking at the footprint of your building.
It's an odd one.
Your garage is on the right side of the building, if you're standing in the lane looking at the house.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Duckworth, regarding the setback of the balcony from the property line, how far setback is the balcony from the edge of Taylor Lane?
For the balcony, we're proposing that it extend to the lot line.
I can't hear you hardly.
For the balcony, we're proposing that it extend to the lot line.
Okay, and so how far back from the edge of Taylor Lane will the edge of the balcony be?
It would essentially be at the edge of Taylor Lane.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Our rationale for that, again, as you noted, the building to either side of our proposed building, the entire building extend to Taylor Lane in the same manner.
Yeah.
With our building setback, we did think that it would be appropriate and within context that the balcony itself would extend to the same.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. All right, Mr. Anson, are you? That's the sum of your presentation.
That's it, sir. Again, that's it.
Okay. I have 2 of your neighbors who are also on our list.
All right.
Ms. Jellicoeur and Mr. Lapointe. So, either one of you. Or no, Mr. Lapointe. Mr. Lapointe, is he there at the present moment?
Yes. Good day, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, and you're at 64 Dufferin?
That's correct.
Okay. Please proceed.
Yes, I also want to thank you, Mr. Chair, and the other members of the committee for providing me an opportunity to address the application. I also want to thank Mr. Duckworth for the comments that he made, which are accurate with respect to discussions that have occurred with respect to that which we have already lived and experienced with respect to the excavation and construction that has occurred at 54 Dufferin. Mr. Duckworth is accurate with respect to the various means that were proposed in terms of alleviating concerns with respect to the fence. However, I would add that those were proposals that were discussed. However, there was nothing concrete in terms of how they are going to proceed. And that is the reason why my letter came as late as it did. I submitted it on Monday because there was essentially no follow-up with respect to that which had been proposed. So in those circumstances, my wife and I are still moving with under the impression that we may very well relive the stress and anxiety that we lived last summer and fall with respect to the excavation. It is trite to say that within the bounds of the bylaws, the owners may do that which they wish with respect to their property. However, with respect to that which occurred at 54 Dufferin, there was encroachment essentially on our property. I'm not going to regurgitate that which I put in the written submission, but simply to say that we were more than accommodating, if you will, by allowing 2x4s to be placed onto our property for several months in order to secure the fence. And you may see from photo number 1, as a result of the setbacks that were also reduced from 1.2 to 0.6 meters, the excavation had to occur right up to the fence, which then left one of the posts in a very precarious position, allowing a section to sag and putting in jeopardy the remainder of the fence. As I also noted, we were fortunate that it was a rather dry summer and autumn. Otherwise, the fence, as well as part of our yard, may have fallen into the hole. Now, the issue is magnified, Mr. Chair, with respect to 294 Mackay, because our house is that much closer to the property line. We also have trees that are very close, if not touching, our fence. So excavation that would occur right up to the fence would jeopardize the root system of those trees and ultimately the trees themselves. We also have a gazebo that is relatively close to the property line.
We have no authority when it comes to things like excavations. You're going to have to really speak to the property owner and come to an accommodation, because we don't involve ourselves in these kinds of discussions. These are civil matters between property owners.
I can appreciate that, Mr. Chair, but
what we need to deal with here are the variances, and we need to hear from you what your position is on the variances that are being requested.
Right, and my opposition is strictly with respect to subparagraph C in terms of the setback. And as you'll see from my written materials, if the setback remains at 1.2 meters, there essentially will be a 2-foot buffer between the excavation and the fence. And I would also point out, with respect to that specific application for minor variance, it is essentially a 50% decrease in the setbacks, which in my respectful submission is not minor. Now, with respect to another point that was raised by Mr. Duckworth, and as in your case, Mr. Chair, I also had difficulty hearing some of that which was advanced. I believe he noted that they're prepared to remove the rooftop and that we were not, and again, this may be inaccurate, that we were not amenable to that. In fact, we were of the view that that was a very positive gesture. The comment was that, again, considering just the overall height of the property or the building, considering again that the setbacks would be reduced by 50%, it would just make that property look that much more imposing over our property.
Mm-hmm.
So again,
and this design change was just, you discussed this with Mr. Duckworth?
It was with respect to the owner. He would have provided that information in an email.
Okay.
That they were proposing to remove the rooftop component, the rooftop building structure, for lack of a better term, and I was very grateful and appreciative of that. But the comment remains that, again, with respect to the setbacks, that with a 50% decrease, again, it just has the building, it gives that building that additional imposing feature, being so close to the property line.
So when you spoke regarding the rooftop patio, you agreed to the removal of that design feature?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
So the bottom line, essentially, Mr. Chair, would be essentially that with that 50% reduction in the setbacks, is that although the owners will have the benefit of that, we are going to incur the consequences with respect of that setback in terms of excavation, trees, etc.
Understood. I think Mr. Wildman has a question. Mr. Wildman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the owner's agent in response to the concerns that were raised with respect to the proximity to the property line and the excavation. what are the what are you proposing to do to alleviate any of those concerns?
With respect to construction process,
So there was a concern raised about an excavation being very close to the lot line, and some concern with respect to structure. I think it was a fence. What are you going to do to protect that?
so with Mr. Lapointe and his wife, we discussed options, and those discussions are ongoing. The simplest method for excavating without impacting the neighbor's property at all would be sheet piling and shoring of the excavation, which would occur entirely on our side of the lot line, essentially creating a retaining wall for grade and preventing any caving in of the property on Mr. Lapointe's side, and preserving the fence as well. So this was an option that was presented to them as a excavation method. If they chose to, or if they decided that they did not want to have any impact on their property. Other options were discussed with respect to potentially allowing excavation on their property, and the owner would pay compensation for the reinstating the landscape and potentially upgrading the landscaping. Was another option presented to Mr. Lapointe, and both that conversation would be ongoing. Both options are options that we still consider viable, and it's really a question between neighbors how that would proceed. But the owner of the property has every intention of maintaining a positive relationship and doing everything that can be done to diminish the effect of living next to a construction site for Mr. Lapointe and his wife, and frankly to avoid any of the issues that Mr. Lapointe raised from the previous construction.
So at some point you'd be submitting your building permit, and that sheet piling option would be part of that permit. You know, the people in the building department would ensure that that sheet piling is done appropriately, correct?
That is correct. If that is the decision that that the neighbors agree to, our client as well as Mr. Lapointe and his wife, if that were the option that they agree to, then that would be the way we would approach it.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Lapointe, any comments on that?
No, that is accurate, Mr. Chair. As I commenced my presentation, these discussions had commenced. There has been no follow-up, and that is the reason why my written materials have come as late as they did at the last opportunity, because there were no further follow-ups by the owners. The owners, through Mr. Duckworth, had proposed these other options, but there was no follow-up. So that is the reason why my written materials have been submitted, as well as today's oral presentation.
Okay, so discussions are continuing, but you still object to variance C regarding the side yard setback?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Right. Anything else, Mr. Lapointe?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Do we have anybody else on the speakers list for this application?
There are no other speakers on this application.
Okay. Mr. Duckworth, you've heard some comments from neighbors. You've responded to Mr. Lapointe's comments. Any response to Mr. Anson's comments?
Yeah, briefly, I'd like to just respond to the comments raised. First of all, to planning. Planning restated their position after my presentation. I'd just like to reiterate what I presented before, which is that the planning department is holding to their interpretation that the dominant pattern on Mackay for parking is, or for parking access, is that there's no parking access. And I believe, as I stated before, that this is in fact not true, as more properties have laneways than do not. I believe that in this case, the methodology for determining dominant pattern is flawed. So I would just like to restate that as our counter to planning's position. And again, with respect to parking access, restate that the zoning bylaws position, we understand that when a rear lane is present, parking access should be through that lane, but in the case of a front to back long semi-detached, the front unit does not have the benefit of that rear access, which is why we believe that in this case, the bylaw, again, doesn't fully account for this situation. So I'd just like to restate that with respect to planning's comments. With respect to Mr. Anson's comments, primarily regarding the safety of use of the laneway, we're certainly sensitive to issues of safety and understand that. However, we again look to the context, and we understand that perhaps these garages aren't currently used for regular in and out car traffic, but there's nothing to stop those garages from being used that way at any point. They are garages, and they are garages that directly access a lane for the specific purpose of providing car access. So a new owner could cease using any of those garages as storage and start using them for car traffic, and that would be the intent purpose of car access off of a lane. And again, with respect to what the zoning bylaw permits as of right, the owner of the property at 294 Mackay would be within their right to demolish the existing single car garage, which crosses into the Taylor Lane setback, and in fact, build a new garage within 2 feet or within 0.6 meters of the lot line, which would be half of the buffer than what we're proposing. Additional to that is just the fact that the traffic we're talking about is a small amount of traffic, and one additional house is not going to have a significant impact on the overall quantity of traffic in and out of Taylor Lane. We're dealing with a small number of houses and consequently a small number of cars. So that would be my response, Mr. Chair. Essentially, what I stated in my presentation, which is both the context and the bylaw as of right seem to support the main issues, permit the main issues that are taken exception with.
And your offer to Mr. Lapointe to remove the rooftop patio still stands?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
But no decision has been taken on that.
With respect to the roof patio?
Yeah.
No, we would be prepared to commit to that change. We interpreted Mr. Lapointe's responses not being particularly interested in that and preferring only to request an increase in our side yard setback. That could be our misinterpretation, and we're happy to proceed with the removal of the rooftop terrace access to reduce the overall building mass adjacent to his property.
That would also mean that you'd have to provide committee with revised plans.
We can provide updated drawings to the committee. I'll note that this wouldn't affect any of the variances being sought. It would simply be an alteration to a non-variance related item.
Then the alteration would be the elimination of the rooftop patio.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. I think one other member had a question or comment. Mr. Wilder.
Oh, just Mr. Blatherwick, Mr. Chair, I would like to suggest we reserve on this application. I don't know how the others feel, but that's what
I agree, Mr. Wilder. I think we need to reserve, yes.
I'd like to say one more thing if possible.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks again, Mr. Duckworth, for the clarifications. But I will say that it seems that, it seems like the proposal is stuck in a bit of a logic trap in that the justification for the parking at the rear is based on a long semi-detached, but at the same time, it actually presupposes the lot being split, and so that you can have parking for two different separate units. So, you're reaching ahead and effectively trying to get the variances for what you're planning for the next stage. As you stated, there's, like what if somebody started using the garage that's already there, and again that assumes that potentially a zoning error or potentially a non-conforming structure built in the past was is something that we should double down on. But it's what if we started using that? What if you rebuilt that into another garage? And to use Mr. Chair's words from the beginning, let's not go on a tangent of what ifs. If the plan was to rebuild that, then so be it. But I think that that would probably diminish your ability to maximize the amount of space, and that's the reason why you're not pursuing it. But I think that again, it's a bit contradictory to say that you need the parking in the back, but you need the parking in the front at the same time because you want to have access to the back. But the back is in case you split the lot and it's a separate unit. Back to the addition or the additional, the amount of traffic in the area. It's a matter of not just volume, but velocity, and it's an exposure to a variable that we're uncertain of at this point. So, whether two cars, one car, and the frequency with which they use the lane, is added, as an addition to our life. That's not the concern that I raised. The concern I raised was a blind spot of having a frequently used, potentially, a two-car garage that directly affronts the laneway. So again, I would say that there's a bit of a contradictory messaging in terms of why you're substantiating the usage in the rear, and how that aligns to your story for the front as well, for the parking that's being sought in the front. I don't think that justifying it by saying that there's already what is the equivalent of a storage space there, is necessarily helpful. I know that it's being done, not, because you're anything nefarious, but you would not rebuild that structure, I doubt, because then you wouldn't have the building option that you're pursuing. And again, making assumptions about, volume, velocity of traffic on the space, it's a variable that nobody can assert. So there's no real point, I think, or help in adding that to the equation. My concerns, again, are to safety and security of both our young children, our neighbors' young children, frequent users of this space. The fact that it is a very small 100-ish meter long one-way that is the only yard space, effectively for a lot of people that live in this urban and already relatively dense space. And and I think that the plans that you have, although genuine and seemingly quite aesthetically pleasing and a great effort at regentrifying that particular space, are good. I think that in conjunction, reliefs D, so Delta, Echo, and Foxtrot, are too much in aggregate, and I think it's too much of an infringement on this space. And I think that the unnecessary exposure to a balcony that directly affronts and directly overhangs to the laneway is a bit too much of a reach. And so I think that the 25%, 7.5 meter rules are probably a bit much, but as it stands right now, I think the design is too much of an imposition and too much of an effort to maximize the usage of that space, which is clearly to be a lot split, building two houses, and not in public interest, but more of personal interest. So certainly not in the best interest of the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this? Any committee members?
No, not
Mr. Duckworth, final word to you.
Well, I think I stated everything I intended to. I don't believe there's any dual logic involved in our case where The proposed construction is a semi-detached dwelling, which is 2 units, replacing a duplex, which is 2 units. The nature of the shape of the lot and the nature of the design is that 1 unit will face Mackay. That means it has parking access from Mackay. And the rear unit, which primary access on Taylor Lane, would have its parking access from there. So I don't fully understand that that would be a gap in logic. But otherwise, I believe that the project is sensitive to the nature of the neighborhood. Again, the zoning, the site analysis plan that we provided shows the building footprints of many buildings in the neighborhood, and we can see that it's a compact and dense neighborhood with many buildings maximizing their site area. We're conscious of the concerns that have been raised, and we believe we have responded to those in our design with the setbacks we're proposing, and therefore believe that it is compatible and desirable. And also, just again to restate that the density of the site being 2 units is being preserved, and that is in keeping with the desire of the official plan to preserve and increase density in urban areas.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Duckworth. Thank you to everybody else. I think we're going to reserve on this application, and you will receive our decision within 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And the hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.